Hi everyone! We are about to start our clay project, but before we can start, you need to learn about the clay rules and terms that you need to know. The rules. The first rule is to stay in your seat. This is mainly when you have your clay out. What I mean by this is I don't want you walking around with your clay piece coming to show me what you've done. If you have a question or you need help, raise your hand and stay in your seat. Do not pick up your clay and come to me. You might drop it and ruin it. You might make a mess. All kinds of things can happen. It's best if you leave your clay on the clay mat and come get help or raise your hand. Do not walk around with your clay. No clay in the sink. Our clay, if it gets in the sink, it will clog the sink. And we do not want that because then we won't have a sink to wash our hands for other projects. Our sinks are not made for clay. So, you may not put any kind of clay, wash your hands in the sink. I will have a bucket for you to wash your tools, to clear your hands of any chunks of clay. Then maybe we can talk about using the sink to wash your hands with soap and water. But if you have any kind of clay on your hands, you cannot use the sink. You have to use the water bucket. The next rule is be responsible with the tools. You are going to be using a variety of tools. Some of them can be dangerous if you're not careful. They're not going to really hurt you unless you're trying, but you could cut yourself if you're not being careful or if you're being silly. We will be using a clay knife. It's a butter knife. It shouldn't hurt you unless you are not being responsible. There are some tools that can break easily, so be careful with the tools and use them for what they're used for. They are for clay. Don't even pretend to use them for anything else. Next, clean up your mess. Clay is messy. Keep your clay on the clay mat so you don't make a big mess, but we will have a mess. It's expected that you clean it up completely. Do not just brush off your clay crumbs onto the floor. That's not cleaning up your mess, that's just moving it. If you get clay on the floor, pick it up or clean it with a sponge. If you get clay anywhere, clean it up. I expect this room to be nice and neat for the next class when we leave. Lastly, no clay in the air. You may not throw your clay for any reason. If I see your clay in the air, I will take it and you will be done and you will no longer be using clay. We don't want to get clay everywhere in the room, and if you're throwing it or tossing it to yourself, you could drop on the floor, it could get somewhere. It's just not what we're doing with our clay. Be responsible, keep your clay on the clay mat, not in the air. Now let's talk a little bit about some clay vocabulary. There are a lot of words that you need to know, but there's three main ones, so let's go through. Score and slip. This is very, very important for this project because we will be attaching clay to clay quite a bit. Score and slip is when you scratch the surface of the clay and wet it with slip when attaching pieces together. So you can see right here, all of this has been scored. It's been scratched up really well. This has been scratched up really well. And then you wet it with slip, which is just watered down clay, and you press them together. And what that does, it just creates a stronger hold. If you're not scoring and slipping, your clay pieces, when they dry, they will fall apart very easily. When you scratch up the clay, you're creating little fingers, and when you smush them all together, they lock together, and the slip just is like a glue. So scoring and slipping keeps your piece stronger, and it will stay together when it dries. Always score and slip when you're attaching pieces of clay together. Next is slab. You will be rolling out a slab, a flat piece of clay with an even thickness. A slab will be the bottom of your coil pot. Next is coil. We are making a coil pot, meaning you need to know what a coil is and how to make one. A coil is a long rope-like piece of clay, and you roll it with your fingers and your hand to make a long rope-like piece of clay. This is what we will be using to build our piece of clay, our artwork, called the coil pot. So I hope that you've learned some rules and vocabulary with this video, and you should be ready to start working with clay.